Selling your wife for rum. What a great idea. Why didn't I f***ing think of this? Selling your wife for rum. Here's a quick sponsor, then we will commence the auction. Bearing. You're more likely to have your data compromised than ever. In 2020 alone, 500,000 user accounts belonging to a popular video conferencing app were stolen and sold on the deep web. Usernames and passwords were sold for as low as a penny. Tech experts believe the number of stolen accounts could be in the millions in the future. Relying on big tech companies to protect you is no longer an option. ISPs, advertisers and government agencies all want a piece of your information. That's why I'm such a big advocate of VirtualShield. VirtualShield is a no-log VPN that helps protect your private data from hackers. Data like your IDs, social security number, bank accounts and medical history. Protecting yourself takes seconds and works on all your devices. At the end of the day, it's your responsibility to take control of your privacy, and VirtualShield helps make that possible. Try VirtualShield risk-free for 30 days and receive 50% off for life by going to virtualshield.com/bear or using the link below. So this is an article from ABC News, the history of Australia's drinking culture, from rum as a currency to non-alcoholic wine. Fucking non-alcoholic wine. What kind of FGT drinks non-alcoholic wine? Australia's first Prime Minister, Edmund Toby Barton, was many things: a leader, a visionary, and as one of his obituaries summed up, a great Australian. And according to author Matt Murphy, he was also an outright drunk. His nickname was Toby Tosspot. At the time, these things were considered endearing, he tells ABCRN's Rear Vision. If you look at our early parliaments, drunkenness was just accepted, and Barton is far from the exception. Since colonial times, Australia has been a country soaked in booze, as drinking has been both a national pastime and a source of untold harm and tragedy. But is this finally starting to change? Nah. Colonial roots. When the first fleet set off from England 235 years ago, its cargo was indicative of the kind of country Australia would become. The first governor of New South Wales, Arthur Phillip, insisted on bringing 2 years' worth of carefully rationed food for the new settlement, in case conditions were inhospitable for agriculture. He also took along 4 years' worth of rum. The Marines who came to escort the First Fleet insisted and finally got their way to have 4 years' worth of rum on board. But it didn't last close to 4 years, says Murphy, who wrote the book Rum, A Distilled History of Colonial Australia. It's hard to overstate how important booze was in the first few decades of the colony. Alcohol was a currency. If you wanted something done, you had to pay for it. And how were you paying for it? Booze, Mr. Murphy says. There's lots of records of people buying and selling things for rum. For example, buying land in the Sydney suburb of Pyramont for rum, or selling your wife for rum.
What?
You know, I was thinking about this before, and I think this is a good system, but you were born in Scotland, right? So a fair trade is a fair trade. So I could probably get some finely aged scotch for you, right?
They didn't have scotch, they had rum. Yeah.
Shut up. It's a funny joke. You f***ed up for me.
Sorry. You don't even like rum.
Yeah, that's why I want finely aged scotch for a finely aged Scot.
Yeah, but you don't you? As if you wouldn't have started drinking rum if that was the only thing.
I'd have drank anything. I'd have drank kangaroo blood if it got me pissed.
You'd be like licking frogs.
The New South Wales Corps, or the Permanent Regiment of the British Army, became known as the Rum Corps because they controlled the access to alcohol. Rum became a generic term. People were making rum from potatoes and making rum out of peaches. There was hooch, backyard rubbish. People died on the spot from drinking this. They went blind. It was pretty nasty stuff, Mr. Murphy says. But people would need rum to start their day, like people need their coffee today. And look at this. He's so f***odd. Look at his face, it's all lopsided. His mate's carrying him around in a wheelbarrow.
Probably one of your ancestors.
Yeah, I think that was my great uncle Colin. He was a good man, all right. He just had a few vices.
He's near dead.
Yeah, I know, but don't judge him. During these early days of the colony, grog was also introduced to the First Nations people, or the Indigenous, or the First Australians, or whatever the we've got to call them, which had incredibly destructive effects. Yeah, they can't handle their alcohol. Like seriously, you go to Alice Springs, right, and you're like 20 k's out from Alice Springs on the highway. I forget which highway it's called. and you see just piles and piles of VB cans. VB is Victoria Bitter. It's a kind of beer. It's not a very nice kind of beer, but it's a beer that they drink quite a lot of. Hashtag not all. The social, economic and health tolls of this much alcohol across Australian society prompted various governments to try and curb the drinking habits, but this came with mixed results. The 6 o'clock swill. Let me tell you something, I know about the 6 o'clock swill. My grandfather, who just recently died, God bless his soul, used to own pubs through the 50s and 60s, and they had this thing called 6 o'clock closing, because the government tried to curb alcoholism. And so they're like, oh, okay, all the bars have to close at 6 o'clock. And so would get out of work at like 5 o'clock, make a dash for the pub, and drink as much piss as they could. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is why they came up with the term 6 o'clock swill. Starting in 1916, states adopted rules where bars had to close at 6 p.m. It partly came about because of the temperance movement, because they were wanting to cut down on alcohol consumption, says Richard Midford, an adjunct professor at Curtin University's National Drug Research Institute and clinical psychologist. But it came into place during the First World War, in a major part because people felt that the home front shouldn't be having a good time while the boys were away fighting in France. And look at these pissed c***s. We'll get another jug, darling. Oh, thank you, Tots. But the 6 o'clock swill, as it became known, had an unintended consequence. A culture of extremely heavy drinking developed, yeah, like I said, where workers would drink as much as they could between clocking off at 5 p.m. and the 6 p.m. bar closures. It was not pretty. Bars would lay sawdust on the floor to soak up patrons' urine and vomit. While many were refitted with tiled walls and floors, a feature which remains today. To make cleaning easier, that is true. A lot of Australian pubs have tiled walls and floors. I didn't realise that was why, but it's pretty funny. It lasted from the time of the First World War right through, in some states, to the 1960s, Professor Midford says. And here's some more getting f***ed. But wait, that clock says 10 p.m. Almost 10 p.m. That doesn't make sense. In 1965, an unlikely invention was introduced to try to reduce drinking: the wine cask, or the goon bag, as we used to call it when I was like 13, 14. The wine cask was invented to preserve wine, not to drink it more quickly, Mr. Murphy says. Oh, get f***ed. You could scull a goon bag, pass out, blow the up and use it as a pillow. When you take the cork out of wine, it immediately starts to oxidise. It immediately starts to go off. And so the average person would rather drink it than tipping it down the sink tomorrow. Cask wine does not oxidise. But he says it quickly became just a convenient thing to stick under your arm to take to a party. Yes, it did. In my teenage years, you'd see like a drunk slapper walking down the road with a goon bag under her arm, and you'd call that a goon purse or a goon handbag. Booze and politics. Alcohol and politics has long been a noxious mix in this country. According to Mr. Murphy, the fact that Australia's first Prime Minister was an outright drunk isn't even the most outrageous example. Not even close. John Norton was elected in a New South Wales by-election in 1898. When he entered Parliament, he was drunk every day, Mr. Murphy says. Really, I mean disgustingly drunk apparently. To such a point that about 2 months later he downed his Dax and pissed on the parliamentary carpet. What a funny Mr. Murphy also points to then Governor-General John Kerr's drunken speech at the 1977 Melbourne Cup, which he calls disgusting. An inebriated Kerr rambled on in front of his racetrack audience, noting life is wonderful for all of us, before presenting the cup. And he is f***ed. Let me tell you, he's shit-faced. Let's watch this video. We've got to watch this video.
Mr. Chairman, ladies and gentlemen, any little noises that you may happen to hear are only static. It's just something wrong with the system. I want you to understand, and I know that you will, that the minor noises do not destroy the marvellous occasion today is for me and for my wife. It is the 4th Melbourne Cup that I will have presented, and I have come down with my wife, with the approval of His Royal Highness, who's having a rest up there in Government House, to do just this thing because he wanted me to and I wanted to. And I wanted to do it. Because this is a great Australian festival. But I didn't know when I came that an old mate of mine would turn out to be the owner or one of the owners of the winner. So my task is first of all to congratulate the owners. I don't know Mr. and Mrs. Harris, though I have met them, and I congratulate them. But the Gages, Gage has been a mate of mine for a long time. Didn't tell me, didn't give me the information, so I wasn't on the winner, but congratulations to the owners. Won't say anything about Mr. Cummings. It's all written down here for me on a piece of paper, but you've heard it over the loudspeaker, and anyhow, you know all about him. Now, of course, the jockey, Mr. Duggan, comes from Sydney. Now, you don't often get a Melbourne Cup jockey winner from Sydney, but it's not a bad city just the same. They produce good jockeys up there, and every now and again they produce other people who, get along in the world. Now, Gold and Black, of course, is the winner, and it is the horse after all. That is the horse after... Do I hear some quaint piece of static over there? It is the horse after all, which is the great character on an occasion like this. So let us all, when the moment comes, cheer the horse. The owners, the trainer, the jockey and the horse. And this is the last time that I will be saying this. Cheers from a small minority. However, life is wonderful for all of us, especially winners of the Melbourne Cup. Congratulations to all of you, and I'll be back again as a spectator.
Bob Hawke, who by the way was a beloved Labor Prime Minister in the 1990s, said himself that his most endearing attribute to all Australians was his world record for drinking a yard glass, Mr. Murphy adds. Hawke, so this is the Australian Prime Minister. Hawke entered the Guinness Book of Records in 1954 for finishing a yard glass of ale in 11 seconds while he was studying at University College, Oxford, as a Rhodes Scholar. But he gave up drinking when he went into Parliament and stayed off the grog while he was Prime Minister. Okay, let's see, what is a fucking yard glass? A yard of ale, or a yard glass, is a very tall beer glass, used for drinking around 2.5 imperial pints, 1.4 litres of beer. And we voted this in as Prime Minister. God, I love Australia. I'm going to end it there. Thank you very much for watching. I'm selling my wife for rum.
No.
Any takers, just email me. Keen to hear your comments down below or at my super duper gay half stepbrother-in-law's Twitter account, Bskills. That's with 3 L's with the at the start because it's f***ing Twitter. All right, thank you very much. Goodbye.
Recession, session. Give me better times, give me better times. Recession, session.